Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, welcome everyone. We're so excited to have you here to talk about 5 things to do instead of quitting your job, which is a very fun, very timely topic, I think. And I'm Libby. I'm the director of marketing here. As I mentioned, very excited to be hosting this webinar. I'm also a coach, which is how I first came to Amelia. Natalia, you have some intro slides as well, right?
Yes, I
So
do.
maybe we'll start there. We're Amelia. We are a career, life, leadership, and health coaching company. As I mentioned earlier, we are based out of Chicago, but our coaches and our team are kind of all over the US. So really tuning in from everywhere. We're all about helping you love your life. So really taking that 360 view, holistically looking at what's going on in your career, not just necessarily the short-term job change or quick fixes that you're looking for, but looking as well at what is the big picture, what is the vision for the future, and helping you create not just short-term fixes, but also a long-term plan to help you really build the life you love. All right. And as you're joining, please make sure to go on mute. All right. Next slide.
That's me.
Yeah.
Hi,
Before we jump
yeah.
in, I do want to do some really quick logistics, letting everybody know that this is being recorded, which I know you got the pop-up. We will send out the recording afterwards, as well as post this up on YouTube. So you're welcome to check out our YouTube channel. I'm going to drop some links right now in the chat and we'll get going. Okay, Natalia, all you.
Cool. Yeah. And then if anyone has questions, you can pop them in the chat. I can't see them right now, but Libby, you'll be my eyes for any questions that pop up. But we'll have time for questions at the end as well. So you can write anything down if you want for the end of the webinar. So I'm Natalia. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming and showing up. I'm a holistic life and career coach, and I always like to keep that word holistic in there. Like Libby said, I like to focus on everything that my clients are going through, not just a career change or not just the life transition, but really seeing how all the aspects of our life kind of play with each other and interact and are connected. So what we're doing today is focusing on things you can do that are within your job, outside of your job. I'm guessing if you all are here, you might be feeling a certain kind of way about your job that you don't want to be feeling. So I hope that after today's webinar, you're just feeling a little bit more empowered to kind of move forward and take some action just around your life and your career. So here's today's agenda. Really quickly, we're going to go over just some few reasons why people quit, and I'll also ask all of you to share why you're wanting to quit, or why you're here, or why you've quit a job in the past, to get a sense of what is really behind that impetus of quitting a job and what makes people do that. Then we'll talk about taking back the power and what that means. And we'll go into 5 things you can do instead of quitting. And I want to caveat this by saying that quitting is not the wrong choice every single time, or maybe ever, right? But it is what I really want to stretch today is what other options are there when maybe we're feeling really frustrated and really overwhelmed by our jobs. And what are some things that we can do instead of quitting or before we quit to kind of see what things can I tap into, and maybe if it's still not right, it's not right. So just want to outline that right off the get-go. Then we'll have some time for questions and we'll talk about next steps. You can take notes, but as Libby said, we'll be recording this. So if there's any particular thing or part of the webinar that you want to watch again or take notes on later, this will be sent out to you so you can watch it as many times as you want. Cool. So let's start. Why do you want to quit your job? So you can pop it in the chat. Just some reasons why you're you're wanting to quit now, or you've wanted to quit in the past? Not fulfilling, but stressful. Not enough income. You're hitting three reasons, Julia, right there, the perfect storm. What are some other reasons? Okay.
So we've got
Underappreciated.
Not enough income, not challenging, no growth, micromanagers instead of mentors, feeling underappreciated, and looking for better income again, learning opportunities, and supportive leadership. So we kind of got everything across the spectrum there.
Yeah, lots of bosses, relationships.
Erica, I love that. Not just wanting a job, but a career. Absolutely. Scope changes in their role, stress.
Yeah. Thank you all for sharing. Now that I've kind of read and heard what everyone's feeling, what I want to do before we even jump into reasons that why people quit and into the webinar, I just want to invite everyone to take some deep breaths. I know all those feelings of being underappreciated and stressed and not feeling heard or valued can bring up a lot of emotion. So let's just take a moment right now to pause, take some deep breaths, and try to be really present just in the next 45 minutes to an hour. So I'm going to close my eyes. You can do whatever feels good. Turn off your video, turn on your video. Just take deep breaths in through your nose and exhale through your mouth. You can exhale really loud if that feels good. Let out any frustration. We'll do one more. Inhale and exhale. I do this often, and I always like, if you ever want to groan or yell or scream in that exhale, I always find it very, very refreshing and liberating. So, not to anyone's surprise, but a lot of the most common reasons why people quit are all the ones that everyone listed. Looking for more of a challenge, a higher salary, feeling uninspired, wanting to be valued, seeking a better relationship with your boss or your management, wanting growth or career advancement or development, like wanting a career and not just a job, and needing better work-life balance, which I think can incorporate a lot of these things, right? And when I mentioned that perfect storm of stress and uninspired and income issues, the work-life balance kind of feels tipsy-turvy. So one of the things that I'll be talking about today is the expectations that we put on our jobs or our careers to give us certain things, right? I have a lot of clients that come to me and say, I'm just looking for my dream job, that perfect job. It's going to give me everything. It's going to give me that salary. I'm going to feel good about it. I'm going to feel confident. I'm going to love everyone I work with. I'm going to be creative, but also be paid a ton of money and also have time off to take all the vacations in the world. And while that is amazing, and I hope there is a job out there that you find sometime in your life that gives you that, it is a thing that doesn't happen very often. And for some people, it doesn't always happen that a job has all of the things. So what I want to do today is help you take back the power. Because when we expect a job to give us all of these things and meet all of these criteria, we're giving it a lot of the power. We're saying this job is going to give me my sense of self-worth. It's going to give me the money I need to pay the bills and more. It's going to give me great relationships. It's going to give me a mental stimulation. And we're kind of removing the power that we have to engage or to disengage or to create something for ourselves that meets this criteria that we want. And so what it leaves us at is this quote that I always love. And my mom has told me this many times, and I always carry it with me, that wherever you go, there you are. And I think this can be taken in two ways, right? It can mean that no matter where you go, we all have unhealthy habits or tendencies that aren't super helpful, or maybe negative patterns that we have fallen into, that no matter how great a job is or how cool a new city is that we move to, they're coming with us too, right? We don't really leave them behind. But on the flip side of that, it means that you also have strengths, interests, gifts, qualities and characteristics, and healthy habits and healthy boundaries that you can set, that then you can also take with you wherever you go. So this idea is what I want you to think about is, if wherever you go, you are there, which parts do you want to lean into and which parts do you want to lean away from? And that's really just the goal of today. So I'll share 5 things that you can look or explore or try other than quitting your job to see how you're feeling, and seeing if these emotions of feeling stressed, feeling uninspired, feeling undervalued, shift. And that's really what it is, an experiment. So what are those 5 things? So the first one is set and honor your boundaries. I know that by now you've probably been beaten over the head with the word boundaries, and it has become such a buzzword, and it can also feel really nebulous and really overwhelming and hard to understand. So we'll find some ways to make them simpler, but also make them really impactful and powerful. Change your environment. So I'll come back to this metaphor of our environment, and just both personally and professionally, of being like a garden and figuring out how to tend your garden and how to show up and upkeep a garden and an environment that helps you thrive. Redesign your role. So this is where you get to be a little bit creative. You get to be a little bit bold. I think a lot of us go into a job thinking, well, this is my job description, so this is what I'm supposed to do. And the third option is really, okay, how do you challenge that thought? How do you challenge that belief and redesign what you're doing a little bit? Lean into social capital, and we'll talk about what social capital means and how you can lean into it for your benefit. And redefining your why. So we'll go through each one of these. We'll talk about what they are and how are some ways that you can channel these or commit to these. And I'll also talk about who each of these options might be a good fit for. So depending on what you're feeling or what your struggle is, what might be a good fit for you. And before we dive into this, I want to take just a moment to say something I say to all my clients. And I always say, what would it look like for you to lower your expectations of yourself? And I want to lower them for you just right off the bat, that I don't want you to go home and say, I'm going to do all 5 things and I'm going to commit to doing all of these 5 things tomorrow. So at the end of the webinar, I'll ask everyone to share or to just write down on their own private notebook the one thing you're going to commit to this month. And so I'm setting that expectation low for a reason. So you can really choose what would be the most impactful for me right now. And then maybe next month you can come back, watch this again, and choose a different one. But we're just gonna choose one. Okay, so setting and honoring your boundaries. So this might be a good option for you. I think setting and honoring boundaries is good for everybody, but really focusing on it, some people might be better than others. We might already have boundaries in place. But some signs of our boundaries being either non-existent or being violated is feeling burnt out, feeling resentful of other people, whether it's coworkers or people you don't know or your family, wishing you had more hours in the day, or always feeling like there's not enough and you're always just kind of playing catch up. So if any of those feelings resonate with you, take some notes. This might be a good option for you. We'll kind of keep going to see what it all means. So the exercise that I like to do for setting and honoring your boundaries, really to set them first, you need to know, well, what's the ideal, right? Like, what would my day look like that I would feel like I was setting myself up for success? So there's some questions here, and there's so many more that you can ask yourself. But what I always say is start journaling whenever you have a moment and just write down, my ideal day would start by me waking up at a certain time and how you feel when you wake up. I want also to be really clear, this isn't your ideal day off or your ideal day on vacation. It's your ideal day if you still had to make money, if you still had to go to work, take care of your kids, if you have any other responsibilities, you still have to do those. But what would your ideal day doing all those things that are on your plate, what would that look like? And so really answering these questions, both for your personal life. So how do you spend your mornings and your afternoons outside of work? How do you spend maybe a weekend if you want to throw that in there? And then how do you spend your day? How do you engage with your work day? Whether your work day is at home or in an office or just in a different location, how do you show up? And what does your ideal day look like? And just going through that whole day. Once you have that whole day, the next question is to get really clear on what boundary or what parameters you need to make that ideal day possible, right? So if I say that my ideal day is having a really slow morning without much stress or without, too much commotion going on, then maybe one of the things I do is my boundaries that I don't check my work emails or any of my phone notifications in the morning, right? Because then I start thinking about all the things I have to do and the people I have to get back to. So I say, that's my boundary until 9 a.m. when I clock in or I start my work day, I don't check my work emails. Maybe if you realize I need to get outside every single day. So I either take a full hour lunch away from my desk to go on a walk and eat, or I get outside every morning before work or after work. So kind of deciding what are the things, the boundaries that I need to set to live out that ideal day. And then really important, communicating your boundaries. So once you understand the why, what you need and why you need it, communicating to your boss and your team members, and maybe your loved one or your kids or the people that might be affected by these boundaries, telling them what they are and what you need. And I want to be really clear that boundaries are not about making everyone happy. So I would argue that if you set your boundaries and every single person that you encounter is happy about them, maybe they're not the greatest boundaries for you, right? Especially when we're used to doing things or showing up a certain way that maybe isn't super helpful for us. When we start to show up differently, there's always some sort of friction, right? We're switching people's expectations. We're changing. So that can cause discomfort and cause conflict. And I just want to be clear that that doesn't mean that it's wrong. And it doesn't mean that you should not set that boundary or honor it. And then lastly, honoring your boundaries. This is the hardest part. It is so easy to say, I won't check my phone until 9 a.m. or I'm going to take a full hour at lunch, but it is not so easy actually honoring that. So I always say, create structures that make it really easy for you to honor your boundaries. So the less work or the less convincing you have to do to honor your boundary, the better. I just saw that Google Calendars lets you put focus time on your calendar. And when you do that, it automatically declines any meetings that get booked during that time. And that just removes even just a second for you to say, oh, fine, I'll just push that and I won't do it, because you won't even know it's there. It will just automatically decline it for you. Other things or like preparing your clothes the night before if you want to go on a walk or work out, and setting alarms. I was just telling Libby this the other day that I accept that I am a flawed human and that I don't have the capacity in my brain to remember everything that I need to remember. So I'm a huge proponent for alarms, reminders. So then I can remove that from my brain and leave room for other more important things to be there. So that's boundaries. And this one's the longest slide really, because I think a lot of the things about setting and honoring your boundaries kind of carry on into the other things that we're going to talk about. So really, really important, and probably have a lot to do with all the steps moving forward. So changing your environment. This might be a good option for you if you're feeling bored or uninspired, or you feel really restless, or you're having a hard time focusing or staying motivated, or you just feel blah. This might be a really good option to consider. So like I said, I like to think of ourselves as flowers and our life as a garden. And really what I've learned, and what I think we all are starting to see now, is that the corporate world or hustle culture or some societal standards sort of assume that we're all the same flower and that we all need the same amount of soil and sun and water to thrive. But really, that's not true. We're all different, and we have different needs that need to be met to create the right environment. And it's really about us testing and figuring out what that ratio is for ourselves. So some questions to reflect on this. What kinds of environments allow you to focus and be productive? So do you like total quiet? Do you like some background noise? Do you like sitting at a desk, or do you prefer being outside? Thinking about where you find inspiration, whether it's your personal or your professional life. And then thinking about, how do you recharge? So if you have like the most tiring day of your life, what do you go to? What sort of activities, what type of people? And what's the opposite? What drains your energy? What activities and what people and what interactions drain you? And then thinking about experiences where you felt like you were thriving. And I want to be really clear that thriving means you felt like you were on top of your game, but also grounded. So not when you were just running on adrenaline and a bunch of coffee and just getting things done, but a moment that you really felt centered and in flow. And I want you to break that down. What did it look like? What were you doing? What did it feel like? Who were you with? And it can be really big experiences, or it can be really, really small daily experiences. And so with this, again, communication and consistency is key. So once you figure out what environment you need for certain, it might be different for certain things. Like when you're doing focus work, your environment might look different than when you're collaborating. When you're doing personal stuff, it might look different when you're doing work stuff. And then share your plans with your manager, your colleagues. Ask how they can support you, and then also share how you will support them better when you have this environment, when you have these changes to your day and to your experience. So I think communication, we always come back to this. We're sometimes so scared to say anything to rock the boat. But if you're coming to a manager, to a colleague, say, hey, these are all the things that are going to make me be better. And this is how it's going to support me. Here's what you can do to help me get there. And please let me know what I can do for you. That's a really great way to approach that conversation. And the next thing is iterate. So like I said, changing your environment is a testing. You're always testing it out. It's always shifting, different seasons, different things that you have on your plate. I mean, for women, different hormonal cycles. For men, your hormones kind of shift throughout the day, all day long. So it's so wild for us to be expected to be 100% of the time. So I want you to incorporate weekly check-ins and really, really simple check-ins. How am I feeling this week? Forum always taught me this question, and I love to ask it about anything. How am I feeling, and what do I need to start doing, stop doing, or continue doing, right? That's the simple check-in. It shouldn't take more than a few minutes, but just a way that you can identify if things are working and keep doing them, or if things aren't working and you need to start something else or stop something. And knowing that this is ever evolving, and like a garden, you can't just plant some seeds and put some water and there you go, they're going to grow. You have to come back to it and tend it and take care of it and be kind to it. So this is what this looks like. And I love thinking about a garden because we tend to be really kind to flowers or to food that we're growing. We don't tend to do that so much for ourselves. So trying to have that image and seeing yourself as something that's beautiful and that's worthy of being tended and taken care of. Okay, the next one, redesigning your role. So redesigning your role might be a good option for you if you really like your company or your team or the organization you work for, but you're feeling bored or just uninspired. Or maybe you've recently learned new skills, whether it's a certificate or a conference you went to and you really want to lean into those, or you're just ready for something new, right? And like I said, sometimes quitting your job and finding that something new is the right choice. But for a lot of us, we have to pay the bills. We have to kind of learn as we go. So how do you redesign your role to fit these new skills or this new need that you have for novelty? So I've said this once, I've written a blog post about it. I say it every day. I really don't believe the dream job exists. What I do believe is that we have the power to mold and create our ideal role and mostly our ideal life by leaning into our strengths and our interests and implementing little changes, not only in the work that we do, but in the way that we do our work. And that makes for an ideal experience, but it's not the job that is the dream job. So really simple exercise I like to do when you're just thinking about this is making a list of all the tasks and responsibilities that your role consists of. It can be anything, big or small. It doesn't have to be your job description, but really, what does your day look like? So I always encourage, as you're going through your day and you do certain things, just write them down and maybe do that for a whole week. And then at the end of the week, go through that list and circle all of the things that you want more of or that you really like doing, and underline the things that you want less of or you don't like doing. So thinking back to that environment, are there things that really energize you? Circle them. If there's things that really drain you, underline them. And then add any things that maybe you're not doing right now, or you're doing very, very sparingly that you'd like to do. And that can be anything related to your job or not. What would you like to do? And then after you've done that, go through again and think about how can you capitalize on the circle tasks? How can you make sure those are top priority, or you spend more of your time doing them, or you really honor the time that you do them so you can get in the flow and enjoy it instead of rushing through it? And how do you make the underlying tasks less painful? So that doesn't mean, oh, they can go away and you never have to do them again. But what do you need to do to delegate, to make them just easier, to get them out of the way faster, to make it more efficient, to make it a thing that's just less painful for you? And then how do you incorporate new tasks into your day? So that could be, how do you start doing new things at work that maybe are related to your job or adjacent and could be helpful? Or how do you pick up hobbies or do things after work or before work that would incorporate these new skills or this new task that you'd really want to be doing? And redesigning your role, again, iteration, I think, is the key here. You're not going to just guess the one thing and say, okay, I hit it, eureka, I found it. It's all about doing. I want a little bit more of this. Okay, when I do more of that, do I feel better or do I feel worse? And then checking in and continuing that process. So the next one is leaning into social capital. So what does social capital mean? The definition of social capital is the networks of relationships among people who live and work in a society that then enable that society to function effectively. So at your work, it's the people that you're connected, whether it's at your company, within your industry, in your network, or maybe a certain group that you're a part of. And really, it's just people, right? Leaning into social capital is leaning into people and community. So this might be a really good option for you if you like your company, you enjoy your company culture, you feel safe there to share your thoughts or to kind of ask for support. It's good if you have really strong connections in your company, but it's also a good option if you don't have established connections yet in your network, but you want to make them and you want to get to know people. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, I want to get to know everyone on the marketing team. If I'm on the marketing team, it might be, you know what, I'm on the marketing team, but I really love the finance team at our company and I want to know more about them and I want to establish those connections. So what does leaning into social capital look like? It can look a lot of ways. So really it's about asking yourself, how can I lean into the people and the relationships that I have to get a little bit closer to what I want out of this job, right? So for a lot of us, a really easy thing right now is just reconnecting, right? After the last few years, the social capital is still there, but it has felt very hidden and far away and really distant. So maybe the first step is, how do I re-engage? How do I make those connections again? How do I strengthen those relationships that I had before that over the last 2 years have gotten really loose because of what everyone's been going through and working from home, which is also a huge shift for a lot of us. Other ways that this can look at a little bit more specifically, it can look like cross-collaborating on projects with other departments. So maybe if you're really interested in something that involves more than just your team and just leaning into the resources that you already have, people's skills, people's experiences, and other people's connections to collaborate on projects that are more fun and exciting. It might look like shadowing someone in a whole different role. So I know some companies are just really naturally good at offering this as an option, but if not, maybe creating it yourself. So talking to someone and say, can I shadow you for a couple meetings or for a whole day? Or can we just talk about what you do at work so I can learn because I'm interested? Or even just talking to your manager about your career path and seeking their support about planning maybe where else you fit in the company or how your career can evolve. When you're thinking about feeling like someone who said, like, I want a career, not just a job, leaning into the people that you know and that know you to think about, okay, how do I create a career out of what I have? How can I lean into my community to make this feel like a career and not feel just like a job? And there's a lot of benefits and why this works. And for you, these exploratory conversations are a lot easier when you have people that you have some sort of relationship with, or you have a common ground, right? Like cross-collaborative projects are easy when everyone at your company essentially wants the same bottom line. Asking to shadow someone is much easier if you're like, hey, I work in the team next to you, we always exchange emails. It's easier to start those conversations. For your company, it could be a money saver, and it's actually could really be a way to avoid risk. So the average company spends around $1,500 per employee on the onboarding and training process, and this comes with a risk of you spend this money, you invest in a new employee, and they're not a good fit, or they don't work the way that you thought they would work. But when someone is already at the company and you already know how they work, what they deliver, what they're all about, and they're already trained in things, it saves the company money, right? So that's why this is not just you leaning into your social capital, but your company is also leaning into its people and its social capital. So this is really about creating your own path through the relationships that you have at work or within your industry. And then lastly, redefining your why. So like I said before, a lot of us have things that we want out of our job, right? And we always talk about in coaching about deciding what your non-negotiables are. And so this is really about redefining that and checking in. So maybe you had a job, you have a job right now that 3 years ago when you got that job, it was everything you wanted to do. It gave you everything. You felt super mentally stimulated. You loved it. And something big happened in your life and that has changed. So what your job is giving you now and your why of I show up to work because I feel mentally stimulated no longer match up. So this is about how do you redefine that so those things start matching up again. So this might be a good option for you if you have personal responsibilities or other things that take priority over everything else. So how do you redefine what your why is at work so it's not a constant battle between these two things? It might be good if you have a very specific goal in mind, like buying a house or starting your own business. Okay, what's your why? What's worth giving you if you have a very specific goal? And it's really good for you if you're ready to deprioritize work as your meaning giver. So if work is no longer the reason, your purpose, right? The meaning for your life, then it's time to redefine what it is. So if you're ready to kind of think about that, this could be a really good option to shift your mindset around your job. So how do you do this? Really answering some questions. The biggest question right now, today, what is motivating you to go to work? So does work offer you financial stability and benefits? Do you love your team and you just get along with everyone and you love talking to them every day? Do you have a flexible schedule so you could do other things and have other responsibilities? Or do you just love the work that you do and you actually really like doing the work? What is it that motivates you to keep going? Once you answer that question, and it could be a couple things, right? Like really thinking about what are the good things that work is giving me? What is the one good thing? Even if it's really hard and you're feeling really frustrated, what is one good thing? And then deciding what your non-negotiables are from these things. So if work is giving me a flexible schedule, but no financial stability and benefits, but my non-negotiable is having financial stability, then something's gotta switch, right? Then my why for work is financial stability. And that's where I say, okay, you know what? I need to figure out how to get this non-negotiable met. But if my non-negotiable is having a great team and just loving the people I work with, and I have that, maybe that's just my why. And that's why I show up to work and I allow that to be enough. And I put a note in here, they can't all be non-negotiables. So I always say pick one or two. That doesn't mean all the other things don't matter, but you have two that are non-negotiable and then the rest of them, you can rate by the rate of negotiability. So how flexible can you be with the ones that are non-negotiable? And is there one that, oh, you know, I would give up my flexible schedule or working from home if I had a great team that I really like to see every day? Like, what's the relationship between them? And then once you do that, re-engaging in your role with those priorities in mind, and then filling the other cups that maybe aren't getting met by your work elsewhere. So what does that look like? So if your job offers you flexibility and financial stability, but you're not really have any room to be creative or create art because you love art, then sign up for art classes. Or maybe creativity for you looks like something different. Sign up to do something outside of work that fills the cup of creativity, and allow work to just be great. It gives me the flexibility and the money that I can go do these other things to fill my cup. Or if your job offers you mental stimulation, you really love it, but it doesn't give you that financial stability, we go back to setting boundaries. How do you set boundaries so you can show up to work and do your thing, but maybe find additional streams of income, or maybe work with a coach to figure out, okay, how do I not lose the mental stimulation at my work, but find the financial stability? Who do I talk to? And that's where you can go back to the other tips that we've talked about of, can I lean into social capital to get a promotion or to get a raise? Or what are these things that I can do to find additional streams of income? But it's really important to set those boundaries first, so you have the space to think about it. All right, that's the 5. So I want to open the floor to any questions, and then we'll talk more about the commitments and the one that you're going to choose to focus on.
Amazing. So feel free. I've got a couple questions that have come up during the chat that I've kept track of. While you're getting ready and typing, I'm going to drop a couple links into the chat as well. So first and foremost, if you're interested in learning more and maybe getting a more personalized, customized solution for you, definitely recommend that you learn more to see if coaching is right for you. So I'll be sending a link right now in the chat where you can book a free consultation with one of our relationship strategists. They are pretty much the kindest, most fun people to talk to anyway. So I really recommend that Natalia's laughing because it's
it's true.
They're so great. And so if there's just something going on, if you're like, this didn't quite answer all my questions, that's a really great place to start. You're like, wow, I'm really ready for some changes. Definitely book one of those calls. If you know that you're ready to sign up for coaching and you're like, nope, I am ready to go, whether that's with Natalia or if you'd like to just be matched with a coach in general, I'm going to drop this link in there, and be sure to use code. We have a promo code that I'm going to drop in called First Sesh Free. And it means that if you sign up during this webinar, you will get your first coaching session free. So when you check out, use that code, it will give you a free session, which is a really great offer. We're really excited about that. All right. So Natalia, for you, first question, they're jumping all the way back to communicating boundaries. As far as communicating boundaries, if you've got a boss that you've worked with for a while, but now you want to establish new boundaries, how would you go about doing that?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I think this comes up a lot all the time. Like, hey, I'm already shown up this way. How do I set new boundaries? And I always say, name that, right? Like if you've been working with a boss for a while and you know you've been doing things a certain way, and say you have a check-in with them, tell them like, hey, I know we've been working together for a long time, and I know that I usually, for example, I'm available whenever to answer your emails, but I'm noticing that this is affecting my mental wellness or just my enjoyment of work. And I want to make sure that I shift things so I can show up better for work. So I just wanted to let you know, I'll be totally offline before 8 and after 5, right? So really naming the fact that something is shifting and not just wanting to do it behind the scenes. So part of communicating is sharing the reasoning and explaining why this would be helpful for you. So I think that would be my best just advice is naming it and being really honest with that shift that's happening.
I really like the way that you phrased that, Natalia. I think that's really helpful. So the next question was related to job shadowing. How would you handle job shadowing in a remote work environment? Because that's definitely complex.
Yeah. I think it really depends a lot on the type of job that you want to shadow. But I think it's like, for example, I did this at a past job that I had that I really wanted to learn a little bit more about website design, right? So I asked my boss, like, hey, next time you're just building out the wireframes for this website, do you mind just screen sharing with me? And we can say, okay, let's schedule an hour when you're going to do this. And I'll just watch you do it. And you can kind of talk through what you're doing. And I can write out questions, and then we can have a check-in later to answer my questions. Again, like I said, this is so different depending on the type of job. And I think that's really when you choose, like, okay, is this a job that I can shadow doing a screen share or joining in a meeting, right? Like if I want to learn how another coach does something, I might say, hey, can I jump into one of your sessions that a client might be open to it? Or can I send you some questions about how you do things? So then deciding, okay, can I shadow? Or is it more of an informational interview that I can ask questions that I'm curious about? Or saying like, hey, is there an exercise that you do that I could try out to see if this is a good fit for me? So I think just getting really creative in what shadowing really means.
Yeah. And it sounds like there's an element as well, Natalia, of like, shadowing in an actual in-person environment is so great because you can just literally sit next to someone and see everything that they're doing. Whereas in these remote environments, it's more about creating almost a curriculum or like a list of what it is you want to be learning.
Yes. And I think it's actually, even though it makes things a little bit more complicated, it makes them be more intentional. So you have to really think about, okay, what's the point? Like, what am I trying to get out of this shadowing? And what sorts of things and what sort of experiences would answer that or will help me get there?
I love that. And Aditya, I hope I said your name right. I saw that you had your hand raised. Do you want to come off mute and ask your question?
Yeah, this is my first time. I joined from the Everbright. I thought, let's go, boy. What's the quit your job mean?
Aditya, I know that you were able to just join a couple minutes ago, so we're definitely going to be sending the full recording. I think you may have missed a chunk of it. You correct me if that's not the case, but we're going to send out the recording as well as some additional resources so that you can see the full thing and make sure that you get all of it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. Cool. So we do have a few more minutes. Does anyone else have any questions that you would like to discuss while we've got Natalia on the line? I'll vamp for a second if anybody wants to type anything in the chat.
If we don't have questions, before people hop off, I have one more slide to share.
Ooh.
So what I want you all to think about right now is, and I love this because I love Moira, think about, I'm ready for this. I'm ready to take some of the power back from our job. And I want you to think about what's the one thing you're going to commit to this month, and just take a moment to think about it. And once you have it, write it down, share it on the chat, just kind of build some commitment to it by saying it out loud. And you can reach out to each other if you want. If there's someone in here that you know to be your accountability buddy, you can reach out to a coach so they can help you put this into action. Share this with a loved one. But I want everyone to come out of this with a commitment. And out of the 5 things that we have, so I'll put them up here again, which one are you committing to this month?
Ooh, those are great. All right, so in the chat, I'm actually going to jump to one question that I think is really poignant of how do you handle a situation where there's microaggression and implicit bias in a department? Super intense. Great question to ask.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think that's also one of these examples that I share of like, sometimes, I'm not saying you have to quit your job, but sometimes analyzing those sorts of things like toxic work environments or places that there's microaggression or bias is, how do you deal with it and how much are you willing to deal with it, right? Like, is there an HR or a support that you can address this with, or is this embedded into the culture and it's time for you to find something else? And then thinking about, okay, what parts of this thing that I'm enjoying at work, is it because of these negative toxic traits of my work environment? And what are the parts that I can take control over and I can focus on? So really, a lot of this is not just taking back the power in the ways that you can, but also knowing that sometimes we just have to let go. So I think with that, it's like, there's so much in there that it's so specific to the situation. But I always say, like, reaching out to HR team, if there's anything like worse going on, like thinking about like, what do you need and what support do you need to get out of that type of environment?
Yeah. And I will say the other thing that comes to mind with that, and this person also just dropped in the chat that they're in HR and it's leadership that's the problem, which is just so unfortunate. And I think that I couldn't agree more, Natalia. I love that your point of like, maybe it is time to start thinking about leaving, because for truly toxic work environments, that doesn't really hit the criteria that you laid out at the very beginning of the presentation of like when it's time to think about staying versus leaving. But this does also sound like a spot where if you're not ready to leave yet, maybe boundaries is where that sits of like, hi, this is a chance for me to educate you about why this isn't appropriate or this isn't really okay. And if you're not comfortable with that, it is a spot to leave, which is unfortunate that it falls on, it's never a blame the victim. It's never that this is like your responsibility or your job. But if you're choosing to stay, that's a place where maybe you could explore.
Yeah. And I think it also touches on, and I never want to encourage anybody to like stay at a job with microaggressions or any type of toxic characteristics, but it makes me think about, okay, if you can't just quit your job, right? Like we don't all have the ability to just do that and then figure out what's the next move. Is can you redefine your why and then set your boundaries around that? Like, hey, my job is not where I feel valued and heard right now, but it does let me pay for the bills. So I'm going to make sure that I protect my energy and I protect myself while I'm looking for that other thing, because sometimes redefining our why is in the short term, right? So we don't get all consumed by this thing that we're struggling with.
I think that's a really great point. I'm just scanning. I think we've gotten to most of the questions. So if there's any else, we will. Lots of thank yous in the chat. So really appreciate it. Really glad that this was helpful. Natalia, do you want to flip to your last slide? Because you do have the contact information there.
Yep.
If there are questions that either we didn't get to, or I missed or misrepresented, as always, as I posted earlier, you can join, sign up for a session with a relationship strategist or email us. You can email Natalia directly or email Amelia. We have a contact form on the website. And we would love to answer your questions and support you. Anything else I missed before we let everybody go, Natalia?
No, that's it. Thank you so much. And yeah, feel free to email me. Like if there's any questions you didn't want to ask or you just think about them later, I'm always available to answer them.
Amazing.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you all. This recording and the resources will be sent out. And if you would like, we are also posting all of our webinar recordings up onto YouTube. So you can follow us on YouTube as well to see all of the amazing content that we've been posting over the last, gosh, year, 2 years now. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good
Thank you.
night.
Bye. Good
Bye.
night.